Welcome to the Mama Mindset. We have another episode today. I'm so excited for today's guest. If you guys don't know, I made the goal of talking to 1,000 moms, which is a lofty goal, but I have a feeling we'll hit it at some point. And I started this channel really because as a first-time mom, I feel like I did a lot of research, but at the same time, I got my daughter got here, and then I was just like, what the hell is this? There's what you see in videos, and then there's real life. And I said, you know what? I need some mom friends. I'm sure I'm not the only one having this experience, and I'm curious to see like what other people's experiences are like as a mom. So here we are now. The Mama Mindset is really a safe space for moms from all different paths of life and journeys for us to come, learn, laugh, and love. And so, with that being said, today's guest is a former high school teacher turned UGC creator who left a tenor coaching teaching career in 2023 to pursue her passion for content creation. Her journey was deeply inspired by her experiences as a mom with two preemie boys. Her first son was born at 27 weeks and spent 115 days in NICU, which is, we'll get into that, intense. And her second was also a preemie born at 35 weeks. These challenges motivated Anna to build her own business, allowing her more time with her family while pursuing more creative and better aligned work. As a first generation immigrant, a mom, and a bold career changer at 36, Anna's story proves that it's never too late to follow your dreams. I'm a true believer in that. Today, she helps moms and aspiring creators kickstart and grow their UGC businesses through digital resources and coaching, sharing practical tips to inspire others to thrive in the UGC space. So please welcome Anna. Anna, how's it going?
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to dive in. This is going to be like my first time actually talking about my journey as a mommy and like a business owner all combined together. So I'm really excited to dive in.
Good, good. I'm happy to be here and allow you the space to tell that story. So like let's get into it from jump, right? Okay, so pops out to me is, preemie children and then the NICU, like talk about your pregnancy journey maybe a little bit and then like how do we get here?
Yeah, so, it was kind of crazy. When I got pregnant with my first son, the pregnancy was really, really smooth. I mean, I was low risk, I was high energy, I had like all of this time to work out and like do all of my regular stuff. I mean, I didn't even look pregnant, to be honest with you. And half of the people at work were like, wait a minute, you're pregnant? Are you serious? Like, you look great. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is great. And, it all kind of just goes back to 5 years now it's been where my husband and I, we were, kind of just having a grand old time. We're both teachers. It's May and we're eating lobster roll at the seafood festival and we're enjoying the time of our lives. And then the next day we had this like hiking trip planned to go to upstate New York to do like a little, hiking and whatnot. I'm 27 weeks pregnant, no complications, no health issues, nothing, just no indications of that there's anything wrong. And of course, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I ate a little bit too much of that extra lobster roll the night before because something is brewing and something is not right there,
Okay.
yeah, little time goes by and I started to feel like that something could be seriously wrong. And so, of
Mm.
course, I called my midwife and she was like, "Hey, why don't you just come in and see what's going on?" And I kid you not, in the moment that like we drove from my apartment to the hospital, it was like a 10-minute ride. It hit me. I'm like, I think I'm going to have a baby today. Like it went from zero, everything is wonderful, to I think something is seriously wrong. I think that the baby is coming. And, to me, as somebody who did not expect to have a baby at 27 weeks, obviously, there were no complications. There was absolutely zero, any kind of like, nothing happened to create this trauma at 27 weeks. When I got to the hospital, they did the exam and they're like, the baby's here. We are going to push. And literally, it was so chaotic that we went from going hiking that morning to literally being rolled around at the speed of light through the hospital to get me a room to start pushing this 27 weeker baby out. It was absolutely insane. It was insane. I think my husband almost passed out like as soon
I
as the
mean, come
baby
on,
was out.
rightfully so. Okay, okay,
Yeah, it was insane.
so let me guess, like no epidural, no nothing. You don't have time,
Nothing,
right? Nothing.
nothing. There
So
was
what did
no
that feel
time.
like?
Honestly, I think I was just in shock. I think that like my brain wasn't registering what was happening because of the fact that there was no complications and there were no any kind of issues that happened before to indicate that I could go into labor prematurely. So I think my brain just wasn't processing. And what I was doing was like, I was just focusing on my midwife and basically following the instructions that she was giving. And that's all I could do at that time because I'm like, I don't know if this baby's gonna make it. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I'm not sure what even happened at this point. And like up until the time when I gave birth and they actually took my son away to the NICU, I was still like in shock and I still had no idea what had actually happened. Like nobody really knew what had actually happened. And, eventually when my son was taken to the NICU, I sat down with her and I said, like, how could this be? How could a perfectly healthy individual go into labor at 27 weeks with zero complications prior to this experience? And she looked at me and she said that it seems like there was an issue with your placenta.
Mm.
So turns out that, and this was confirmed later by lab reports and whatnot, was that my placenta had spontaneously abrupted in the middle of the night when I was sleeping. And so I started to internally bleed. And so my son began to position himself for exit, so to speak. And so this is something that I haven't mentioned before too, is that like when he came out, he was completely purple from like his head to his chest because of the bruising, because he was like turning himself for labor. So
Wow.
we really didn't know whether or not he was going to even survive that because obviously no epidural, no steroid shots, nothing. It was just like, hey, here you go, you're going to push and the baby's out. Boom. And so the whole process was extremely fast. It was extremely traumatic and it really didn't like the situation didn't register until probably like that afternoon to that nighttime when I was like, oh my God, like I remember going to the mirror and like feeling my belly and just feeling like something was missing and like I wasn't complete anymore, but it wasn't like registering yet, if that makes sense. Like my brain had like issues catching up of what actually happened.
No, I can agree. I mean, obviously my birth experience wasn't that traumatic in the delivery. It was traumatic as far as being induced. We'll get into that later. But I think after I had my daughter Sky, it probably took me like I kept looking at her like, yo, that really came out of me. That
Like
moment
what
of
happened?
like what happened? Like I really did this. This is
Yeah.
insane. I felt like that probably for like 2 weeks. So I can't imagine for you, having a child in NICU, what that was like. So, okay, so you have his baby in the NICU, then what are like the next like few weeks like?
So when he came out, he had a lot of issues with breathing with his lungs. So he had to be intubated as soon as possible. Like when he came out, there was no skin to skin. There was none of that. It was like he was immediately taken by a team of like 12 people. And each person was responsible for basically keeping him alive in one way or another.
Wow.
And so, once he got placed into the little incubator, he wasn't doing really well on the ventilator. His lungs were still not recovering and still not getting enough oxygen. So they had to basically switch up the machine and put him on an oscillator, which is probably the most like aggressive oxygen pumping machine that they have in the NICU. And it was basically giving him like 300 little tiny breaths every single minute. So that way his entire body was just shaking the entire time. And just for reference, guys, my son was 2 pounds and 7 ounces when he was born. He was the size of like a little tiny eggplant. And he kind of looked like one because he was so bruised up from the trauma when he was turning and positioning for birth in my stomach. So the first couple of weeks were extremely traumatic because we really had no idea whether or not he was even going to live. It was almost like we just got plunged into this life of not knowing what was what and what day was what and what time it was. We just kind of stayed at the hospital. We listened to doctors and tried to comprehend what they were saying, but it was really difficult to even understand what was happening in the first 2 weeks because we had no idea what NICU life was like. We had no idea whether or not he was going to make it. And all of these terms that were being thrown at us, we were just like, can somebody explain this to us in normal English, please? Because we don't know. So it was very chaotic.
Okay, so what state were you in at the time of this?
New Jersey.
Okay, so New Jersey. I'm not familiar with like New Jersey healthcare, but like now we're about to be in 2025. That is a
Hmm.
constant thing that's going on for females all across the US. It's like, what am I actually covered with, etc. So, at the time, like, did your insurance, you were a teacher, like did your insurance cover all this, or were you gonna get slapped with like a big bill?
So it's kind of like one of those things where the insurance was covering. And if you spend 30 days or more in the NICU, anything that's not covered by insurance actually gets picked up by the state, at least in New Jersey does. So that was really good to know because we weren't going to be responsible for that financial responsibility later on. However, like at the end of our almost 4 month long NICU stay, we got the bill and it was paid in full by our insurances, but we got the bill for $2.6 million for my son's birth and stay at the NICU. I was like, should we just move to another country if we had to pay this off? Like, where are we going?
Where are
We
we
are not
going?
doing this.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
insane.
Well, at least you could tell him, hey, baby, you were at least
2
2.6
million,
million.
baby.
That's insane. Okay, so you said 4 months was this entire process,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
You probably didn't have 4 months of maternity leave.
No,
So
I did
then
not.
you got to go back and forth between hospital, work, and then so what was that like?
So my son was born in May. He was supposed to be born in August. So luckily, because, well, kind of luckily, but also unluckily, is I've had some sick days saved up for my maternity leave for my school district. And because school year officially ended in June, I had those 2 months kind of like piggyback on my maternity leave. So I wasn't going back to school until September. However, in September, my son was still in the NICU. Like he was still there. So then, of course, I maxed out all of my sick days that I could because it was a medical necessity that I did. And eventually, obviously, we'll get into postpartum a little bit later on in our conversation too. But I've struggled a lot with postpartum after this experience. And so I seeked out help. And luckily for me, my provider was able to let my district know that I was not suitable for to go back to work. So I was able to
Mhm.
take off the rest of the school year off. It was unpaid, but I was able to stay home with my son, although, obviously it was not supported financially whatsoever.
Okay. So then now we're not getting the check at some point, right? We're still recovering postpartum and we're going back and forth between the hospital and
Hmm.
everything else you have going on. Like how did that affect your relationship? And like how did your husband adapt?
We just kind of, like both of us, we kind of lived in this limbo because we really didn't know whether or not, first of all, like the first month, like whether or not my son was going to even make it. Like we just had no idea if he was going to survive this because of his issues, because of the lungs, because of all of the other things that came up in the process. I think that both of us dealt with it in our own way. I think that since that experience, both of us are not the same. It's just fundamentally changed us. He kept a lot of his emotions in, where I would like just break down on a daily basis, and I just needed that outlet, and a lot of the things is that a lot of the family members and our friends didn't really like, they knew what was happening, but they didn't really understand the severity of the situation. So we did have each other to fall back on because we were the only two people that really understood what was happening. And so I used him as my rock and he used kind of me as his rock. And we just kind of like, whenever we broke down, we just broke down together because we had no other choice, because there was nobody really out there that really knew our situation. So it was kind of, I don't want to say it was like the best thing that happened to us because it wasn't, but it made us really strong because it made us realize that if we can face this together, then we could really face anything, because that was truly one of the hardest things that I could imagine anybody were to ever go through.
Yeah, I don't know what tops that. That's definitely up there, especially in
It's,
a
yeah.
relationship. Okay, so at some point, son gets out of the hospital, right? And then it's
Mm-hmm.
time to come home and look at what new life is. Do you feel like because he was in the NICU, like for me, like I know I'm constantly like I'm paranoid about safety, like I'm transferring her, especially like my first
Mm-hmm.
couple weeks of like I don't want to drop her, like all these things, right? And I can get into kind of like what my dynamics in my relationship and how that's really a thing. But we'll kick it off with you. Do you feel like you were like extra cautious because you had a NICU baby? Like, were you paranoid that something else was gonna happen?
Extremely, yeah, extremely. I mean, we were dismissed from the hospital, and my son was having really hard time with feeding. And so what ended up happening was he was aspirating on my breast milk, meaning that like the consistency of my breast milk was too thin for him. So the breast milk was actually going into his lungs, and that's very serious. So what we had to do was I was pumping for 4 months in the NICU because I was super stubborn. And ironically, like one of the nurses in the NICU, I remember specifically said to me, she's like, oh, by the time he gets discharged, you're going to be on formula and everything's going to be fine. And I'm like, no, I'm going to pump, I'm going to breastfeed. And I was like so stubborn about him getting the breast milk because somehow I related that to him being dismissed and like discharged earlier for whatever reason. Like in my mind, I was like, this is what I have to do. So I was pumping for 4 months exclusively. And then once we were discharged, he still could not breastfeed, even though the supply was there and he was willing. But because of the fact that my breast milk was too thin in consistency, I would pump. Then I would take that breast milk, I would add this like special formula to it to make it thicker. So I would thicken it. Then I would let it sit. Then I would feed it to him. Then we had to do these like nebulizing treatments for his lungs 3 times a day. And
Ooh,
then, of course, I had to give him all kinds of medicine and medications that he was on. And it was just like a never ending cycle. Like, I just felt like every single day was just me waking up, like preparing food, pumping, thickening that food, putting him to sleep. And by the time he woke up, like I was doing it all over again. Like that was my life. Plus, there was always like the never ending doctor appointments and the follow ups and, you know, specialists to see and whatnot. So it just felt like I went from like being this like happy go lucky, nothing can bother me, like I'm very happy as an individual to a complete 180 of like, my life is not my life anymore. My life is my son's
hmm,
life, you know. And my husband did go back to work, and I just felt extremely alone because of the fact that my husband was at work, so all of the responsibilities to take care of my son kind of fell on me. So that got really hard, especially after we were discharged, because you know he also had an apnea monitor, so we had to like take care of these wires that he was hooked up to. So it was just like the first 4 months were like, oh my god, like what is happening? It was
wow.
crazy.
It sounds crazy. I can relate to the experience of where you're talking about, like, yo, I had a whole life. And then, like, for me, it was like as soon as she came out, as soon as the baby came out, it clicked really fast. It,
That's
like,
it.
your life is never gonna be like
Mm-hmm.
just yours anymore. Like, at least at this stage, this young stage, like, it was just the smallest thing. Like, okay, I plan my day. You get what I'm saying? Like, before the baby comes
Mm-hmm.
out, to like now your whole day is based off of the baby. Like, she's
Right.
dictating the day,
The
you're
baby's
planning
planning your
around the
day.
baby. Like that is the day. And so for us, my boyfriend, he's a survivor of epilepsy. So if you're not familiar
Mm.
with that is, it's just a random seizure disorder. And so good thing he's doing good now. We'll be hitting his 1 year without a seizure in January. So he's
Wow.
had epilepsy for 10 years, and this is the longest that he's ever been without a seizure. But regardless, because he has a disability, like the dynamics in our relationship are different. It looks different for us as far as parenting, especially at this age. We decided that essentially for safety reasons, like as far as like physically picking her up, transporting her, like all of those things, that's essentially on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and like the first few days, like I definitely undercalculated like what the amount of support that I was gonna need. I definitely undercalculated like as far as like how intense it was going to be to have a kid. And so I like would not have made it through the last 3 months without my mom. It's just like literally wouldn't be possible because of course she was coming out, she wasn't sleeping. I was still recovering from giving birth, which was a pretty intense situation. And then on top of that, like why some couples or most couples like are able to divvy up the night shift was 100% on me
Mm-hmm.
because one of his triggers is sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So that like you have a newborn. What do you lose out on sleep? So he's on one side of the house, I'm on another side of the house, and then I'm having to deal with waking up, breastfeeding, all of that. And so I can relate to saying like, when you are carrying the majority of the load, and then I think there is this definite sense of loneliness. And like for
Mm-hmm.
us, it's like, yes, I'm choosing this. I understand. You could have a logical understanding about like why this is happening. Like for you, it's like, okay, he has to go back to work. Like that's logical. Somebody's got to contribute financially right now because we need the
Right.
money. So I have to do this. Like, boom. For me, it's like, okay, it's logical for this portion until she's able to do more physical things on her own. I have to do the physicality because it's better for her safety. Like, that's the logic, right? And then the postpartum hits, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
in your head. And like I don't think anybody really prepares you for that because it looks different for everybody. I think I was able to identify those moments because I had previously dealt with anxiety, PTSD, depression. So like I was able to see it pop it when it popped up on me, and I was like, okay, this is a postpartum moment. Like let me not respond, let me not react, let me just be quiet for like a second and calm
Mm-hmm.
my mind down. So I think just that process is just a lot. And so I can't imagine like having your experience, like how intense that would be. And you woke up one day and went on a hike and a baby came out. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
it
at
was
least
it was crazy.
that's insane. Like, that's almost like those toilet stories you hear about and people just have a baby. Like, what? And so, I mean, I knew my baby was coming and it still threw me for a ringer. So I can't imagine that. That's wild. So, okay, so she gets out. It's a whole intense process. At what point, I don't know if it has even evened out. Like, how is his health now? And then, like, is it an ongoing process or like how old is he now?
So we got onto like early intervention and trying to get him help as soon as possible because when you're a preemie, they say that like the number of months that you were born prematurely is the number of years it's going to take you to catch up. And I
Wow.
found that to be 100% true for my son's situation. So he was 3 months early, and it did take him about 3 years to catch up, to be fully caught up to his peers. Now, when we were leaving the NICU, they were basically saying to us that he may have learning disabilities, he may have other disabilities, he may have issues. We don't know what's going to happen. Only time will tell. So the best thing you could do for him is to get him in early intervention and start working with him and start helping him to develop his skills and catch up to his peers. So we were kind of familiar with early intervention because we were both teachers at the time. So we got on to the process as soon as possible. We enrolled him into physical therapy, occupational therapy, developmental therapy, like everything you could think of. And so we would have therapists come to our house, work with him. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so I always laugh like about this because I'm like, well, my son was actually a COVID baby before COVID was a thing because we were doing all of these precautions before even COVID hit. Like we had to wear
Mhm.
masks around him because his immune system was so terrible in the first couple of months of his life. So we had to deal with all of these therapies for the first 3 years of his life. Eventually, he graduated from physical therapy and then he started to get speech therapy because he was delayed in speech. And so, of course, there's a concern with delays, disabilities, autism, everything you can think of on planet Earth. And so eventually we got him tested for everything. And by the age of 3, he officially caught up to his peers. And now you would have no idea that he was a preemie. He's 5 now, by the way. So you would
Wow.
have no idea. I mean, he's a little quirky and uncoordinated at times, but I feel like that's everybody. But yeah, he pulled through. And we got so lucky. And I always, like think back to our like amazing NICU nurses who like literally saved my son's life. And I'm just so thankful to be able to be in this position who can say that like we got lucky, he pulled through, and there's nothing wrong with him because he's completely fine and he caught up. And not that we know of, we don't have any long-term effects from this experience besides him having asthma. That's as far as it goes, which is
Yeah, but
incredible.
that's a win. If that's all we got out of that experience,
Right.
we'll take that. We're gonna take that and we're gonna run with it.
100,000 times percent, 100 times. Yeah,
Wow. Okay, so this is baby one. Now,
that's baby
me,
one. Yeah.
I would have been. That's it. We're gonna phone it in because that's where I'm at right now. I'm like, no, not gonna be
Yeah.
two. So you did it again. What were you thinking and why?
Oh my God, what a question. So I come from like a really small family and I always wanted like more kids. I always wanted like 2 to 3 kids. My husband comes from Italian family. It's like in their blood to have like 1,000 kids. I'm just kidding, but not really. So he always wanted more kids. So, once my son was kind of like at an age where we're like, okay, I think he's doing okay. I think maybe if we're gonna do this, we should just do it now because we're going to change our minds and we're not going to want to do this again. And so when we started to try for number two, like it happened fairly quickly. And once it
Right.
happened, we're like, all right, we're just going to do it. But this time the pregnancy was completely different. This time I was sick to my stomach. I was vomiting every freaking day, 3 times a day. I was like miserable, low energy. And like, of course, I was high risk as well. So I was at the doctor's office every 2 weeks, doing scans, doing progesterone shots in my shoulder just to like keep the quote unquote baby in and whatnot. So it was very, very different experience. And I kind of said to myself, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this baby number three because this is ridiculous at this point. Like, absolutely not. And so pregnancy number two was completely different. And so we thought that we were having a girl, but it turns out that we were having another boy. But
Well,
he
how did you
just
confuse it? You guys waited or they got it wrong?
No, it's because of the symptoms. So with my
Okay.
first son, I was feeling amazing, right? And so I was like, oh, maybe if I have another boy, I'm gonna feel just as good. Nope. This time it was the opposite. I was just feeling absolutely terrible. Morning sickness, all day sickness,
Yeah, that was
low
me.
energy. It was just did not want to do anything. Food aversions, like I remember I couldn't even like smell like cooked chicken. Like that smell would just like disgust me, and I was
I
just
had
going,
that too. So
oh.
mine wasn't chicken. I gotta think what it is. Well, it was everything I didn't like normally. So like eggs would make me vomit because I don't
Oh
like
my
eggs.
God. Yeah.
Like just the smell of it, I was like, yo, you're gonna have to crack a window. Like
Brussels sprouts, I still can't touch Brussels sprouts to this day. I'm like, I can't. It just like triggered something in my brain and I'm like, I can't touch Brussels sprouts. It's been like forever.
That's
So
hilarious. I
funny.
can keep down chicken, right? And
Yeah.
so, which to know me is insane because you don't understand how much chicken I ate. That's pretty much all I ate was chicken and occasionally fish. So the fact that I couldn't keep down chicken was wild.
Oh
And
my
then my baby
God.
gets out here, right? And she starts having these horrible tummy aches. And we're trying to figure like what's going on? Like what in the world is going on? She's screaming her head off for like 2 hours every night, same time. I get to Googling, researching, whatever. Randomly, one day, I just like, I wonder if it has to do with like I've been eating chicken now that she's been here because I didn't think anything of it. Like maybe it's a correlation because I couldn't keep down chicken in the pregnancy. Maybe it's something to do with that. Turns out I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go 24 hours without chicken. 24 hours without chicken never has a tummy ache ever
You're
again.
kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
Pain. Like, and so I still want to get her allergy tested because I think it
Hmm.
has to be an allergy because it's that extreme. But, and then I feel bad for him, like, yo, how are we gonna be without chicken? Like, you're gonna be the only black girl I know who can't eat. And like, I'm gonna have to give her some comeback jokes because people are definitely gonna crack jokes on that. I'm like, we're figuring it out.
Oh my
And then I'm like,
gosh.
and I was upset. I was like, yo, I really love chicken sandwiches. She can't have that with me. I love chicken fingers. We can't have that experience. Like, no, but at least her tummy doesn't hurt. But yeah.
You gotta do what you
So
gotta do.
you gotta do what you gotta do. I tell moms all the time, I was like, pay attention to what you can and cannot like hold down during pregnancy because maybe it pops up
Hmm.
again, especially if you're gonna breastfeed.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know. And the crazy part about it, went to the pediatrician. They're like, "Oh, it's normal. She'll grow out of it." Like that was the answer. And I have really good doctors and pediatricians, but they didn't make a correlation or even ask, like, what have you been eating? Like, should we do like food stuff, whatever? And no. But wild, super wild.
But you know what? That just goes to show that like you as a mom know your baby the best. And so like you have
Hmm.
to trust your intuition and you have to trust like that inner voice and to just go with your gut feeling because you are the one that has that connection to your child. Like you know your baby the best. So it's like if something feels off or if something feels it's not working, then you're
Don't
the
do
one
it.
that needs to make that call and like do that for your baby, you know?
And I always say like if it's especially just pause it for like 24 hours and reevaluate. You get like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to, especially if something doesn't feel right. Interesting. So like I feel like I'm learning so much because I hear about people who have the NICU experience, and it's everybody's obviously looks different, but I'm always curious like how it feels as a parent to be in that position. And so you were talking a little bit about postpartum. We can get into that some more too. Do you feel like you had it worse the first time or the second time?
Definitely the first time, just because of the shock and the situation. I feel like second time, my experience with my second son was actually like the birth aspect of it was very positive in comparison.
Mhm.
And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but with postpartum aspect, I hit postpartum hard the first time around. Hard. I mean, like I've had issues. I think that that really messed me up, not only for that particular time, but for life. And I still full disclosure, like I still get triggered by like really pregnant women. And I'm jealous when I see them. I'm like, "Ah, man, like you get to have that." Whereas
Mhm.
I gave birth at a time when people didn't even know that I was pregnant. Like some people
Mm.
just thought that I ate two extra sandwiches in the morning like that. So like not that I resent that, but it just affected me way differently the first time than when it did the second time. Because once you go through it the first time, like even though my son ended up in the NICU again, my second son, I had like that faith in the doctor and the nurses that they were going to do their best. Also, knowing that he was 35 weeks and not 27, that's a big difference. So the issues that he had to face were completely different than my little guy. So, it was an experience where like you know what you're going into. It still sucks. It's not easy, but at least like you know what to expect. So there's always that in the back of your mind
Mhm.
telling you that like, look, this is temporary. Like nothing lasts forever. Just give it a few weeks. He's going to be fine. Whereas the first time around, you had no idea whether he was going to be fine, whether this was going to be a permanent or temporary thing, or like what was going to happen. So that whole like unknown aspect of it really took a toll on me mentally, I think. And of course, we kind of touched up on this, but like not going back to work as somebody who's worked my entire life, like from the age of 16, like
Mm.
we've moved to America when I was 12. I got a job as soon as I could and I hustled my way through like every single day since that time. For
Mhm.
me to not work was excruciating because that was part of my identity. Like I needed to be social. I needed to go to work. I needed to teach. Like I needed to do all these things and I couldn't. So that took a toll because my life was not mine. It was my son's. And because of that, my whole entire identity was not me anymore. And I had a really hard time adjusting to that new Anna versus the Anna that was, before my son was born. It was a really tough time.
I think I'm still figuring it out. I can totally relate. Like my whole like everything was based off of like productivity.
Hmm.
Like I got to throw out of writing a list, executing that list every day, like, and that's how I got towards my goals. And like,
You
and
sound
part of
like
it
me.
is, yeah, like part of it is conditioning though. I grew up in a household where like my mom was self-employed, my dad worked a 9 to 5, but he still co-owned a business with my mom. And so like they were heavy from the time we were kids, whether it was sports, education, business, whatever. It was just like execute, 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 execute. It's
Hmm.
like ingrained in me, right? And then I have a baby and I have all these projects and stuff, like films that I've shot that I have not finished editing, like in just in general, like not working out, just like all everything you can think of that's like productive, that is just no. Like whatever you thought you was about to do today, no.
Came to a screeching halt. Yeah.
It's at a complete halt and it's not happening. And not only is it not happening, like you can't even really be, I think it's the fact that you can't be mad that it's not happening too. Like that's a whole nother layer of like, because yes, number one priority is the baby.
And the baby depends on you for literally survival, like
Everything.
everything.
Like,
Everything.
and I don't know why I didn't understand that, but like I did not understand that. And we love our husbands, partners, whatever, right? But like at the end of the day, it is mommy
At the end
because
of the day, he's laying there with his useless nipples, staring at you.
like,
Like,
like
do
what are
something,
you
dude. Do it.
It's
Come
just like,
on.
what are you doing? No, but it's also scientific though. Like you get what I'm saying? There's actual science behind like why they're going to come to us, and this is like regardless of age, they're gonna come to us first. Usually for majority of things, they look for us. They look at our reaction when something happens. She's looking at me to see how I'm going to respond, so she can determine how she's going to respond. And like I've never been in a position where I had somebody who was 100% dependent on me for everything. Like you can't get up because you can't walk. You can't wipe your butt. You can't figure out how to eat. I need to teach you how to sleep. That is so intense for somebody like probably like yourself too, who's so independent and
Hmm.
like not used to having some like that was wild. And I think I'm still trying to figure out that transition. And like I think I'm trying to find the new scribe or the new Kennedy. Like who is that? I think
It's gonna
it
take some time, all in
I'm only
honesty.
3 months
Like,
in. So
yeah, girl, just wait till those sleep regressions hit.
no, I feel like I'm going through one. She's not sleeping tonight. She's not sleeping
They
tonight.
say they say 3 months, 6 months, it's like a year, 18 months, and we've hit all of them. And it was like nightmares because my first son was a horrible sleeper. Luckily, my second one was a good sleeper, but the first guy, he would just want mommy, he would want the binky, he would want the milk, he would want to be held. And we had to sleep train him, and I like broke my heart, but like we had to do it because I am one of those people, maybe like your husband, who's like who needs sleep. I need my sleep. If I don't get my sleep, I'm going to murder someone or just not be a very nice person the next day. So that really took a toll on me too, because I would wake up and I would be extra snappy with everybody around because of the fact that I wasn't getting sleep. And that's something that people don't tell you. Like, the crappy advice on the internet, it's like, sleep when baby sleeps. Like, are
When?
you kidding me? Give me a freaking break. Like, please, really? Who's doing the laundry? Who's making the food? Like, who's doing all the other stuff? Baby's
By
not
the
doing
time
it.
by the time you do everything it takes, especially
Freaking
early
baby
on,
wakes up. The baby wakes up. It's like, what are we doing here?
and those 15 to 20 minutes, especially like the early that they're actually sleep. I just want to sit here. I just want to sit.
I
I
just want to
can't
veg.
sleep.
Right,
I want to
right.
do something. Can I eat? Can I eat right now? No? Can I watch a TV show? No, nothing.
TV, what's that? Just
What is
anything
that?
to turn your brain off and not be in that situation, just to like unwind in some sort, but it doesn't stop. That's like the hardest thing about being like a first time parent or just being a parent is that it doesn't
You don't
stop.
get it. There's no days off in parenthood.
Right,
There's no days off.
exactly.
And I'm
Right.
like, there's no days off in mommyhood. And the only thing that keeps me going is just like she looks at me and she smiles, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's why I'm doing it. Like, or she laughs or she does something cute. God knew what he was doing. He was like, I'm gonna give you guys this little hook and dangle it. I'm gonna dangle it so you guys stay in this thing. And I wake up, and it's crazy. Like we could have the worst night. It never fails. The worst night. Time to wake up in the morning. She's waking up like, "What are
Hey,
we doing today,
mommy.
mommy?" Like, "What are we doing?" And I'm like, "You just caused me hell last night, and you're just ready to go for another one. You got a
Yeah.
short memory, don't you?" It is. I'm like, "Yo, this is wild." You know what I keep telling people? There's no licenses for parents. We have to get a driver's license. You know what I'm saying? We got to get a permit for all types of stuff. And then you can just have a baby and they just send you on your merry way.
That's it. That's it. Sink or swim, baby.
And we did like, I want to say like probably 8 weeks of like the virtual parenting classes and like, so like that's what we did. The average person doesn't even do that. They're
Right.
just, they're just winging it.
They
Like,
are.
what? Wow. Okay, I could talk about that for hours. Let me not. So, all right, you going through this experience first, second time. Did you quit your job after the first child or the second child?
So, when I was on my maternity leave with my second son, this is when I kind of got into UGC, and UGC stands for user generated content. It's basically when you work with companies and brands and you create different type of content for the brands to use for advertising or for their social media pages or basically any kind of like video content that gets posted on the brand's social media pages, their website, etc. I
Mm-hmm.
got into it by a chance, by like a mistake almost. So I've had like a side hustles my entire life. Like I've been an entrepreneurial type of person my entire life. So I've had a jewelry brand called Bear Sandals since 2013. And I was actually hiring creators to create content using my jewelry on one of these UGC apps. And I got this footage back, and these girls sent me these videos. And I was like, oh, I'm curious how this works on the creator side. Like, I'm just curious to see what is the process for doing this. So I signed up for one of these UGC apps. I created a profile, and I was like, oh, baby stuff. I need baby stuff. A crib, a stroller, baby bottles, swaddles, apply, apply, apply. So I just literally went down the list and I started to apply for all of these content jobs that involved being a parent, being a mom, having a kid. And literally, these brands would start sending me products to my house that I actually needed. I didn't have to buy and spend money on them to make videos with my phone. And I was like, this is amazing. What the hell is this? Like, I've just discovered a gold mine because I was, working with these companies while on maternity leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually it got to the point where I had to go back to work because my maternity leave the second time around only lasted 6 months, unfortunately. So I went back to work. And I was also driving an hour and a half.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a very, very long commute. My kids were in daycare for like 10 hours a day, and it was just like insane. And I was thinking to myself, like, I'm like, this something has got to change. Something has got to shift where I cannot allow my kids to be in daycare for 10 hours a day. They're miserable. We see them 2 hours every single day. It's just impossible.
yeah.
So I started to think to myself, like, how can I take this little hobby of me creating content and make it into like a maybe a full-time job? And so,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I started to take it a little bit more seriously. And then it kind of pivoted into me getting more serious about it, accepting more brand deals, and then growing my business to the point where I was eventually able to leave my teaching job. So that kind of worked out.
You think? I love that. Okay, so I've kind of researched, I see YouTube videos about UGC. It's actually something that I want to get into, right?
Hmm.
So let's say for me, I'm starting off from scratch. Like, what would the process be? Would it be like, okay, you mentioned there's some apps where you can submit yourself to. Okay, maybe that's
Hmm.
like step one. Then is there a certain way you need to package yourself? Like, what would you suggest?
Sure. I think that, like, if anybody's listening who is like, oh, this could be interesting. I mean, the only thing that I would say is a definite is to research, because the very first step is you have to educate yourself on like what is UGC, what kind of content brands are looking for, what kind of videos you will be making. Because a lot of the times girls get into it and they're like, oh, well, we'll just make pretty unboxing videos and like, tap our nails on the product packaging, and like that's not what brands are looking for. You need to be able to talk to your phone like it's your best friend, and basically talk about a product or a service like you're talking to your bestie. And essentially that's what brands want. So the first step would be to research and really get an understanding of what UGC is, have a clear understanding of what that would actually look like for you, and if it fits into your lifestyle. Because if you're somebody who values privacy, if you don't like to have your face out there on the internet, this may not be for you. If you feel uncomfortable talking on camera, if you are shy, or maybe it just doesn't come naturally to you, it doesn't mean that you can't learn that skill, but it may not be something that you want to get into, just because it does require you to putting yourself out there so much. So get really clear on what UGC is if this is something that you want to get into. And then I would say get a couple of equipment pieces like a tripod, a few lighting pieces like a clip-on light for the phones. Those are great if you're on a budget. They're fairly cheap. And then I would get on the apps. Definitely get on the apps and create like a pitch video where you are talking on camera, and you're basically, imagine that you're talking to a brand, but your brand is your best friend, and you're telling them why they should hire you and why they should work with you as a content creator. And basically, you take that pitch video and upload that pitch video to those UGC apps. And that way, you can kind of start working with brands as soon as possible. You can kind of get your foot in the door and get in the habit of collaborating with another company and going through the work flow and work process and building that relationship. So that way, when you're ready to kind of graduate from the apps, you have a good bank of content that you can use to build a really good portfolio with. Because a lot of the times on the internet, people will say, grab products around your house, make content with those products around your house, and then pitch brands. Yeah, if you have like 6 months and you don't have a free, like you don't have a job and you have like 20 hours a day to do that, yeah, do that, because that is a really bad advice, because most people that are getting into UGC, they've never made content before. Like they need to practice making content, and, you know, taking products around your house, putting it in a portfolio, and then pitching is not going to land you brand deals, because of the fact that that content is probably going to be not very good. So you need to get those content reps in through the UGC apps, because UGC apps connect you with a brand. They pay very little, but the requirements are also very, very low. So you don't have to
Gotcha.
be a professional. You can be a complete beginner and still get paid for your content and still practice learning those skills that's necessary to take it to the next level. So I think that, in short, to answer your question, it would be to research, create a pitch video, get on the apps, and start applying for as many jobs as you possibly can to kind of like start getting in the habit of working with brands, figuring it out.
Okay, I love that. Numbers wise, like okay, you get on the you said they pay little on the UGC apps. What is little and when everything is relative. So what should you expect?
On the UGC apps, it depends on the app that you're using. So you can expect to get paid anywhere from, I would say, the low end of like $65, the high end of $300 per video. It all depends on the app, and it all depends on like the collaboration and the amount of content that the brand is using and asking you to create. Sometimes it's pictures, sometimes it's video, sometimes you just take the video and you actually don't even have to edit that video. You could just submit all of the raw assets to the brands directly, and then they do the editing on their end. So it really depends. So that would be like a beginner rate. However, once you get into it, once you kind of learn the ins and outs of the business, it's really up to you to how much you want to get paid for your content. Once you get off the apps, once you're working with brands outside of the platforms, whether because they're reaching out to you or you're pitching them directly, or maybe you're using freelancing platforms, this is when you begin to call the shots. And so you can say, well, my base rate for a video is $500, and everything that's extra is extra, and you guys have to pay me an XYZ amount of money. So it really depends on the creator, their experience, and obviously how good their content is, which is what I kind of like about UGC, is that it allows you to be your own boss and set your own rate. And if a brand collaboration or a brand does not want to pay your rate, you don't have to accept it. You could just say, thanks, but no thanks, I'm going to have to pass, and then move on to another project.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's say you built your way up. You've been making content for a while, right? And you're now in the weeds of things. Well, obviously, content creation, it's, goes up and down. What would you say is kind of like an average of what you expect to make a month with UGC?
I would say that right now, comfortably, anywhere between like $5,000 and $8,000 per month is a pretty average. I think that you could go as high as 10, as 12. Some creators make more, but just be mindful that if you are a mom, if you are doing this and you're slightly a little bit older, just like I am, like, those higher paying months come at a price. I don't recommend anybody be ambitious and say, oh, well, I'm going to make $10,000, $15,000 a month with UGC, because that's going to equate to you working absolutely nonstop. Your life is going to become UGC. Like, you don't want that. You don't want that life to be your life. The whole goal of working for yourself is not to be a slave to your own 9 to 5. You have to be able to obviously like branch out and grow your business so your business is working for you and you're not working in your business nonstop. Because how is that going to be different than your 9 to 5 grind? Like, it's not. It's just going to be one grind for another, right? So it's really important to be able to realistically set realistic goals. And I think that with UGC, once you're comfortable and once you're confident and you have a life and you actually have time to spend with your kids, I think anywhere from $5,000 is a pretty realistic expectation. And this is before taxes. I have to mention that too, because a lot of people look at that because taxes are going to hit you quite, we have to account for that.
Okay, fair enough. And what would you say, let's say they started working with you from day one, ground zero, until they get to that point. What does that look like? Is that months? Is that a year?
Everybody's journey, I think, is going to be different. It all varies and it depends on how much time you have.
Mhm.
For me, when I started UGC, it was August 2021. And for the first, I would say, year, I kind of half-assed it, to be honest with you. I was just doing it on the side. I was like, oh, this is fun, cool product. Let me get that. Like, it was completely for wrong reasons. I was not trying to become a full-time content creator at all. I was just
Okay.
like, I just wanted the product. I gotta be honest with you. That's all I cared about. But then, like, once I started to get serious with it, like, because I had that baseline, within 6 months, I was able to grow my business to the point where I was like, this is basically making my teaching, this is matching my teaching salary. Let's
Mhm.
see if I can get it higher. And then started to spend more time with it, and I did get it higher. And eventually I was like, cool, I don't need to technically teach anymore. And so at that point, I remember January, and I was kind of like at a crossroad where I was like, should I quit my teaching job now, or should I wait and like kind of struggle and like wait until the end of the year, because I was working so much that it was really hard to be a teacher. I had a toddler, and like my son was like, one at that time too, and I was doing UGC too. My life was, what life? There was no life, right?
Mhm.
That was my
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
And so I kind of muscled my way through until June, because I really didn't want to leave my school district hanging without a teacher to fulfill my position. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to finish up the school year, and then I'm going to be done, because I just cannot do this physically. And once I was done, it was really, really nice, because no longer did I have to like stress about taking off time when my kids were sick. No longer did I have to like worry, like, oh, well, we want to take a long weekend. I just took a long weekend. It was awesome. But with that in mind, too, like, you are running a business, you are a content creator, you are running a business, and you're working with other businesses. So you do have to treat it as a business from day one, because a lot of people get into it and they think that it's all unicorns and roses and, fields and flowers. And it's not. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's something that I want to look into. So after we hop here, we'll chat a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. And so it frees you up. And so obviously, if moms want to get started, we'll shout out, how they can reach out to you at the end of our conversation.
Absolutely.
So I'm always looking for just little gems, right, to get from people. What is something that you know now as a mom that you wish you could have told yourself when you first started the journey?
I think that everybody is just winging it. Nobody has their shit together. And I'm sorry for saying that, but really nobody has it figured out. Everybody's just doing their best and everybody's winging it. So stop comparing yourself to who's Susan, who's doing XYZ next door, because Susan is also winging it, okay? Like, she doesn't have her shit together, and neither do you. And that's okay. Like, everybody's trying to figure it out, because I think that a lot of like newer moms too, they put a lot of pressure on themselves for like no reason whatsoever. Like, keeping up with the Joneses, like, who cares? Just do your best. Do what works for you and your family. That's it. Like, don't care about what anybody else is doing, because at the end of the day, like, you have to be happy with like your family and your decisions, and the life that you're creating. And if Susan from next door is doing XYZ, good for her. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to keep up. Just, people don't have their crap together. That's just, it's all a facade.
Yeah. Because social media will really have you be like, "Yo, am I a bad mom?" Because how are these moms getting these babies to go to bed?
Right,
The
right.
bedtime
Like,
routine ones to me, I'm like, "Yo,
no.
this is not happening. This can't be happening. How is this happening? How are you getting this 2-month-old baby to go through and
Right.
sleep the night? Not
Please.
happening."
Please.
And
Yeah.
then the outfits, I'm like, that's not. It's not happening. I'm in sweats. That's what I'm in right
That's
now.
what I live in. Right.
Sweats. So how do you find time to do your hair, makeup, face routine, get the baby dressed, matching outfits? You doing all that in a day? And if you are, great. But at the same time, as a mom, I'm not going to feel bad because that's not my reality. And I think I
Exactly.
agree that like as first time moms, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So for me, it wasn't. This is a perfect segue. So for me, it wasn't a pressure on myself to like keep up with people on social media. It was pressure that I created in my head, like for myself. And part of it was like we talked about, we're productivity people. I always say, dream it, plan it, execute. Everybody has a dream. Half people know how to plan. Legends and successful people execute. So I'm like, okay, I had a plan. This is my plan. This is how we're gonna operate. He's gonna be doing this. I'm gonna be doing that. Right. I'm going to be able to handle this, this, and this. He's going to be able to handle this, this, and this. And then the baby gets here.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
that goes shoop, right? And so for me, it's a blessing to be able to have my mom who literally came over and spent like the first 2 weeks with us. And then even after that, she was spending probably like 5 to 6 hours. But like for me, that made me feel so guilty because I'm like, my mom has stuff that she's doing. She's an interior designer, she's a content creator. So she's coming over here with me and it's taking time away from what she needs to do. She still has bills to pay, right? Like, so that was my guilt of like wanting to not accept help because how I'm affecting her. And I don't like
Mm-hmm.
that. That's like not a lot of things that bother me, but like
Mm-hmm.
that one, that's my little thing that I'm like, I don't want to take time away from you given so much to me already as a parent. I don't want to take anything else because I decided to have a child. And it's crazy. We have this conversation with her, right? Growing up, she was always like, when you guys have kids, you're going to raise them. Sky gets here, that goes out the window. She's like, "Wait, how is my baby, not my
Give me the
grandbaby?
baby.
Give me the baby." Like I never would have pegged her for that. Like so she was telling me like, "What are you doing? Like I don't care. Like I'm here to help. I want to be here. Like if I didn't want to be here, and I believe that, I like wouldn't be here. If I'm too tired, I'm going to tell you, right? So like accept this help, accept the help." Which brings me into my saying, which is drop your pride, build your tribe. So everybody needs a tribe. You talked about like it seems like your husband was your closest tribe during this time, right? That helped you. But did you have anybody else? Did you have friends or family members that really stepped in during this, difficult time that you were having?
I think that like all friends and family members too, like my mom was there. And of course, I'm very much like you, where I don't like to ask for help because I feel that guilt of like taking that time away from people who could be doing other things. And I've always been on my own from very young age. So I'm so used to being independent that it like kind of just makes me feel so uncomfortable to ask for help. It's just in my nature, like that just makes me cringe. Like I could do it myself. Like why would I want anybody else's help? But the truth of the matter is that like asking for help is good. Like it's actually good. And like it's going to alleviate some of that stress from you. I think that I had to learn the hard way to stop being so headstrong and saying, oh, I could do everything myself, and actually like reach out to my family and like my mom and like my husband's mom and say, hey, like could you do this? Could you do XYZ? Could you come over and like cook dinner? Or like, could you watch the baby for like 2 hours while I go take a shower or whatever? It's just, you have to do that because even though it makes you feel uncomfortable, because if you don't, you're going to get to that point where it's going to just feel too heavy and it's going to feel impossible to tackle on all of the things that are on your to-do list. So you do have to ask for help. Of course, our friends were there. It was very hard with our friends too, because as much as they were there for us, also they didn't know what we were going through at the same time because they weren't in that situation. So it was kind of like one of those things where like they were there, but they kind of had no idea what it was like. They only had an idea of like what we were telling them. So it was kind of like a double-edged sword in a way where like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, they took our mind off of the issues for a little bit, but at the same time, it's like they couldn't really relate. So it was really tough. So I think that overall, like my husband was my rock during that time of, giving birth and postpartum and all that stuff. And especially too, like with my second too, like since we went to the NICU again, it was like, God, here we go. Like, not again. Like, we're going to do this like second time around, like please, we were trying to avoid that. But at the end, it's really really important to rely on people in your life and to find support. And to be honest with you, when I was going through the NICU, like a lot of the times I would go on like Reddit and I found this
Mm.
community of like NICU parents because I didn't know anybody in my personal life that had a NICU baby that I could
Mm-hmm.
talk to in person. So I resorted to like going on Reddit and connecting with fellow moms on Reddit through like a NICU parenting community. And I was blown away by like how supportive everybody was. And there were people that actually like knew my situation and could relate to like my situation because they've been through it. So that really helped me because, a lot of the times on the internet, like you'll hear all of these negative stories of like
Mm-hmm.
preemies and like babies, having issues for the rest of their lives, but you don't hear the positives
Mm.
because it's simply not as published as often as the negative stories are. So what connecting with other parents on the internet like allowed me to do is to actually see the positive outcomes and like the hope And that was really helpful because I was like, well, maybe it's going to be okay. Because it seemed like when you're in the moment and you're going through it, you're like, oh my God, my world is ending. Like everything's terrible. And like, we're never going to get out of the NICU. We're always going to be here. We're in this limbo, whatever. But then, like, you hear about other people who were in the same situation and got past it and got through it. And it's really encouraging. It gives you that hope. So I would recommend that if anybody's listening and you don't have that support with people around you, seek that support somewhere else, because there are people that are going through similar situations probably out there on the internet somewhere. Connect with those people, and who knows, maybe you will make lifelong friends. You just don't know where that connection will take you. But there are people that are going through the similar things that you are going through.
I think that's the best way to wrap it up. That sums it up. There's somebody going through the things that you're going through. I love that. I'm so happy that we got a chance to talk and I got to get to know your story, what you're about, your family, what you got going on with UGC, everything. So before we hop off, tell people where they can find you, connect you, and then if they want to reach out to learn more about UGC.
Sure, guys. So I'm on all social media at A plus socials. A plus, not like the sign, but like the word plus socials. And of course, if you want to get into UGC, I put out a ton of content on everything from getting started to working with brands to contracts, legal stuff. Everything is on social media. You can visit my stand store or purchase different types of digital products from me, get one-on-one coaching. Basically, I'm here to support anybody that's starting or wants to get into UGC in any way that I can, because teaching is my true passion. I think that I found my little like niche where I combine my business mindset with my teaching passion. And now I get to share everything I know about UGC and how fellow mommies can get started in the business and hopefully take it to the next level, quit their daytime jobs and spend more time with their kids and work for themselves and be girl bosses and mom bosses too. So I am on A plus socials on all of the platforms, guys. So definitely check me out and reach out to me.
Yeah, make sure you guys reach out to her. That's it for this episode of the Mama Mindset. If you want to be one of the 1,000 moms that I talk to, then go ahead, reach out to us on any of the platforms, the Mama Mindset Pod, or you can come to me directly, Instagram, Threads, email, a whole bunch of stuff. The Real Scribe. That's SCRIBE. And can't wait to talk to you guys next time. Bye, mamas.
Bye.